The Captain's Log Radio, with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio Show. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and with me, the Sea Reaper himself, the man, the myth, the legend, a good friend of mine, Captain Chris Argiro. Dude, how are you doing, brother? How is it down there in Southwest Florida?
It's a little chilly today, but it's been good. We've just been fishing every day, and trying to stay warm and stay on the water.
Well, we have filmed 2 episodes together, the season finale of season 5, and then episode 9 of season 6. And when we got out on the first episode, it was chilly. We were battling this time of year. It's so strange. You'll have an 80-degree day, and then you'll have a 50-degree day, and it just cold fronts in and out, in and out, and it's not good for us. It's annoying with wind and different temperatures, and the fish respond differently. And for our first episode, we were focusing on cobia, and we had a plan to sight fish these cobia on the surface in slicked out conditions. We got it all set up. You're like, bro, it's gonna be perfect. It's gonna be calm. The sun's gonna be high. We're gonna be able to see these fish floating high, throw plastic at them, and feed these fish. You said you're gonna be up in the tower, and when we got there, same situation as you're experiencing now. We had a cold front come through, and we had, to quote you from the episode, we have conditions, fishable conditions, not so much favorable conditions. Is that what you're seeing right now? Same kind of concept?
A lot of that. And this time of year, that's exactly it. It's every day is a new day. I was telling my guys today, it's like a factory reset. So whatever pattern you were on, it lasts a week, it may last 2 days, and it's over. You're back to square one. And that's just how it is this time of year. So, it's all about adapting that whole like October really through March, April, even into the
Mm,
spring.
yeah.
You're battling cold fronts and dirty water and these winter tides. I mean, I was blowing mud off the prop, the last 3 days sitting in the
Mm,
bay. And it's a little sketchy, but every day is different. It's so different this time of year.
absolutely. I have to scout on days that I don't have trips. I try to scout and find fish in several places because you end up finding a group of fish here, and then you go out the next day and they could be gone. So you are constantly checking different spots to stay on top of fish because when you have clients show up, your job is to put them on fish. Well, let's focus in on where exactly are you guiding? Tell me the style of fishing that you offer your clients. And I know we have filmed in 2 different areas of Southwest Florida. So let's hone in on what is your area of where you do your charters?
So I am primarily I run out of Fort Myers Beach. So really Marco Waters all the way up to say like Boca Grande area. Um, where I'm really dialed in, kind of the bulk of the fishing that I do is going to be the near shore Gulf, um, inside of 10 miles or so. And there's situations that were 25 or whatever it may be. But for most of my business, near shore Gulf fishing, reefs, wrecks, hard bottom, open water, tide lines, beach fishing, stuff like that. So I am in this little cove of Sanibel that wraps around, and then the straight south cut towards the Everglades, and the 10,000 islands and all that. So I'm right in the middle of all that.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the geography of Florida, Boca Grande, Sanibel, that's the northern portion we was talking about. Down to Marco, that's probably what, 100 miles? That's a good stretch of Southwest Florida. In there you have Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel at the north end, Bonita Springs, There's Marco Island's all the way to the bottom. There's a bunch of town. Naples is in the mix there. There's a ton of towns along that southwestern portion of the state. One of my favorite parts of the state. I absolutely love visiting you and fishing that area. When I was a kid, we would vacation. Man, we vacationed there 4 or 5 years in a row. There on Sanibel Island, and that's where I was really introduced to snook. On our first trip to Sanibel Island, we actually stayed. There was a hotel called the Sanibel Island Resort and Spa or something. It was right at the bridge. What's that boat ramp? There's a boat ramp right there. You know what I'm talking
There's
about?
Punta Rasa.
Yeah, Punta Rasa.
Punta
The
Rasa.
hotel was right next to that boat ramp. So right at the bridge that would lead you over to St. Augustine. And
Yeah.
or not St. Augustine, Sanibel. My dad and I, obviously we packed our fishing rods. I was a kid. I mean, I might have been, I don't know, 8, 9 years old. And we went down there with our little like Mitchell 300s, like a tiny little spinning reel,
Yeah.
all right? Okay, we're talking like this is a 4,000 Osprey, all right? Smaller than this, perfect bass setup on a medium rod, and they have this hotel, they have their own pier. And so we would get some frozen bait and some shrimp and cut up some crab and we would go down to that pier and we were catching a bunch of little stuff.
Is
But
that
then
is that the one with the oh sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Is that the one with the Sanibel Princess, that giant boat out in the front?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we would catch little stuff, right? Like little mangrove snapper or pinfish, and then a giant snook would eat your bait, would eat that fish that you caught. And we didn't have the gear, man. We were that like 10-pound mono on these setups, and pow, in 2 seconds. I'd look at my dad, I was like, bro. I didn't call him bro. I'd call him Pop, but Pop,
Yeah.
what was that? What
That
kind of
place
fish?
is
What kind
that's
of
like
fish did
Jurassic
that?
Park.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So then one day we're down there and these guys pulled up in a boat. This is pre power pole, okay? They tucked their boat up right against that dock and threw an anchor like 15 feet off the beach. And the dock came out and made a T. So think about they were in that wedge there between the end of the dock and the beach. And they got these pilchards or pinfish or whatever they were using, and they slid it up under the boat and then under the dock. And they had these big like 8,000 series reels, big stout rods, and then all of a sudden, oh, you hear them screaming, and we'd watch the fish be thrashing under the dock, and they were landing these giant snook, and that's where I was introduced to snook for the first time.
That's
And
awesome.
when you and I fished, it felt very like well, the first episode we were catching snook on the bottom. Remember on these like wrecks. I think you told me what is it like submerged? Like there's wrecks out there. Is it piles of bridge or what's out there these fish are holding on?
There's a lot of different stuff we fish out there. It's like, some of it's public. It's like old bridges, old pilings and stuff like that. And then some of it is just totally undocumented. You hear 100 stories about how it got there, and I don't believe any of them, but there's a boat down there, a barge or
Huh.
something.
Huh.
But the snook, yeah, they like the high relief, when we get like the barges and stuff like that, big structures they can swim up into. That's big for them.
Yeah, well, they like structure. Snook do like structure, and so for me, it was so cool to be able to catch them. I don't think the next year we were on the island, staying in a different hotel, and we caught snook on the beach throwing mirror lures, and that's where I caught my first snook. But snook love being around structure, whether that being around mangroves, around docks, or on these piles and wrecks near shore. Within 10 miles, it was a sight. On our second film shoot for season 6, Sam, one of our camera guys, swam to, I don't know if you remember this. He swam
Yeah.
to the bottom. We were in like 30 feet of water. Sam's a fish. He free dove with the
I was out
camera.
of breath watching him. That was
Me
crazy.
too. I don't know how the dude does it. So mad props to to Sam, Fish Boy as we like to call him. But he swam to the
Yeah.
bottom and he came up and he's like, "Boys, there are a lot of snook under the boat. Like they're just stacked and they're all giants. It's amazing how they congregate offshore. I would assume that they're offshore spawning, or certain times of the year they might move for a water temp and finding like a temperature that they like to hold for the winter time. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's kind of like the East Coast snook versus West Coast snook, like generally the East Coast snook are a bigger, girthier fish. And it seems over the years, because we do with FWC research, like the Cobia tag and all that, and I've asked them about it. And kind of the take that we've got is the bay snook are the bay snook and the offshore snook are the offshore snook.
Hmm.
I always thought they went back and forth. I'm
Huh.
sure at some point some of them do, but they almost have a different structure to them. When you take a 30-inch snook in the bay, they're more of a longer, skinnier fish. And then you get one out there and a 30-inch snook offshore, I mean, his belly's, massive. And I think those snook live out there full time. I don't think they ever go
Oh,
in the bay.
really?
And we
Well,
see them,
that's
they'll be there in the middle of winter, they'll be there in the middle of summer. So there's no real correlation to, all the fish are in the bay and then all the fish are in the Gulf.
gotcha. That is fascinating.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like almost like
we're
a subspecies of itself.
Yeah, well, we're quickly coming up on a break. We're in our last 30 seconds. Together, we have caught snook, permit, cobia, redfish, and a Goliath grouper, a variety of
Only a
species.
couple Goliath groupers. There's not many
Only
left.
co Yes, yes. And you and you hinted at that. There are so many of them giant fish. So we got
Yeah.
plenty to talk about. I want to hear all about your favorite fish to catch and ways you like to target them. I have Captain Chris Argiro with me from Sea Reaper Sport Fishing Charters in the Fort Myers Beach area. When we get back, more of Captain's Log Radio right here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. Captain Chris, tell me, you started your career in the Keys, correct? You're a Florida Keys native?
Key West, yeah, the Rock. I wouldn't recommend it.
Dude,
It's
I love going down there. I don't know if I could live there. A lot of
no.
people I talk to who have lived in Key West say when they get to the mainland of the state, it's a different feeling. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, it's a Key West. For one, it's not the place that it used to be. When I grew up there, it was different world, and even before I was there, it was a much different place. And now, I go there for a couple days. I catch a sailfish. I go home.
Cool.
It's different.
Cool. Well, this time of year, it's December. We talked about having different cold fronts coming in. In our first episode, we focused in on cobia. Is cobia your number one focus this time of year? Do you get big groups of cobia that come in? Tell me about your cobia fishing.
This time of year, yeah. When we get into these really migratory fish, they are, my favorite fish for that year. They come in when they come in and they leave without question. So,
Hmm.
we've had years where we get a cobia season and it's, 2 weeks long. You get one little wave of fish come through and it's over. Other years, like, the past 2 years have been phenomenal, where we've had them from October all the way through April, May, June, and, they just don't leave. So, Definitely Cobia's up there. Permit. I love my permit. Those are like the bread and butter. They're fun. They're sight
Yeah.
fishing. They go crazy. But yeah, this time of year is cobia mainly.
Well, we got out. The plan was to sight fish cobia. Water was too rough, so we were fishing these wrecks and these reefs near shore. And we did. And I tell you, it is so important. I think if you're gonna go offshore, cobia are curious creatures. I don't think they spook very well. I think that they will come in and check things out if they hear something. Sometimes the boat can invite them up. Oh, what is that? Maybe there's food. Maybe there's something going on. Cobia will tend to stay together. And when you hook one, there's a good possibility that it could have another fish with them. That's just an option, okay? So when you go offshore, I think it's really important to have a pitch rod, a rod that you can pick up quickly and toss a lure or another bait that's ready to go. If you're fishing the bottom and your bait's 30, in this situation, we're in 30 feet of water. If you're fishing in 30 feet of water, you have to crank up to cast it a fish up on the surface. But having a pitch rod and a rod holder behind you, like in Chris's boat on his T-top, something artificial like the DOA bait buster, you can grab that rod, pitch over to it. And that happened to us twice. I had it was actually kind of funny. I had pitched my bait out and you had pitched your bait out and they swam around each other. So I was like, hey, let's switch rods. So I gave you my rod and not 10 seconds after I gave you my rod, you went, oh, and your rod went boop, 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 and you got hit and you came tight. And I looked at you and I was like, yeah, I just gave you that rod. And you start fighting that fish. And then 10 seconds later, your rod that you handed me, that one went off, and we doubled up. Later in the day, here's that situation. I hook up to a fish, we didn't know what it was, and you said, I bet it's a cobia, and I bet he's got one with it. Sure enough, my fish came to the surface and he had a buddy. And you said, Where's that pitch rod? Where's that bait buster? You grabbed that rod with the bait buster, you pitched it at it, dude smashed it, and it was like you cane poled fish. You were cane poling that Cobia. You pitched it 2 feet beside the boat, and he came up and he whacked that purple DOA bait buster. Having that lure ready to go was just perfect, and that happened twice to us that day. Do you? I'm the kind of guy that likes to have different situations. Like I'd like to think about different situations that can happen on the boat. Do you ever have a pitch rod? Is that something you do frequently?
Always. I always have something, whether it's a soft plastic. I mean, it's all situational, but I always have something ready. I mean, I bring like 12 rods on the boat and I've got stuff set up. I've got bear jigs set up. I've got bear hooks set up. I've got heavy stuff, light stuff, just something that when you're like, there it is, you got a 5, 10 second window, throw bait, get it out, bam.
Yeah,
You'll go, and cobia are the top one with this subject because you will hook a fish. We've hooked redfish that, cobia are not redfish are not cobia. You'll have 8 cobia come up with a redfish.
hmm,
And you're just in that moment. If you don't get a bait to that fish, you might not see him again. I
right.
mean, we've had many times you have a big school of cobia come up around the wreck and they're there. They're not leaving. And you see them, they go down and you never hook one. So in that moment, if you can get a bait to that fish, you hook that fish. They're like dolphin. You hook one, the school is going to come with them. If you can get
Yeah.
3 baits, if you can get 3 baits in that school, you will hook 3 fish.
Now on the Atlantic side, it's summertime, slicked out. We get these big manta rays coming through. And these things have a wingspan. I mean, some like 20 feet, like massive rays. Sometimes if you're out in the ocean, if you're tarpon fishing, and you're just kind of scanning around looking for a tarpon roll, and then you'll see one of these giant rays jump out of the water. And a lot of times these rays will have cobia on them. Is that something you guys, I never hear about. Is that something you guys get on the West Coast?
Very rare. And when we do, it tends to be smaller fish.
Hmm.
But with that being said, sharks, fair game. We had a tiger shark like 2 weeks ago,
Hmm.
giant, come up, and there's two cobia on each side of the pec fins, and that was cool. So we do get some of that, but not like those guys do. I know what you're
Yeah.
talking
See,
about.
but
That's
doing
fun.
the exact same thing. I'm assuming that these cobia are picking up the scraps. There's security being around something big moving through the water. There's an ambush point by being underneath something in the water, right? And then if this shark grabs onto something, or if another fish sees the ray and thinks it's some kind of big floating object, some kind of structure. Think about mahi find these structure because the baits or triple tail get on these structure because baits will lay up on it. Perhaps these mahi are thinking this, or these cobia are thinking the same thing. But yeah, following them, the big tiger sharks. I was fishing out of Port Charlotte. We'd go offshore fishing out of Port Charlotte, run out of Charlotte Harbor, and we were in it's a small boat, like a 16-foot Boston whaler. Me and my dad and a family friend. It was a family friend's boat. We were catching fire trucks, red grouper, off the bottom, and man, we were one after the other, and a lot of them were just line burners, just a little short. A bunch of them were legal fish, and so we were just weeding through them, putting the legal fish in the boat, throwing back the shorts, and a tiger shark came up to the boat and got parallel to us, like on the surface. And I yelled at my dad, Dad, look at the tiger shark. I said, Pop, I don't call him Dad. Pop, look at the tiger shark. And he goes, Whoa. And he looked at it, the thing was massive. It was probably 12, 13 feet long. It was huge. It was almost as long as the boat. And then it was took off, gone in 2 seconds. But very, very cool to see these creatures offshore. It's amazing. And I think about Sam going in the water. I can't tell you how many times I've told that
It's
guy,
crazy.
I'm not calling your mama and telling her you
Oh,
got eaten by a shark. You start seeing a shark around, you freaking get in the boat, dude. But he
oh
doesn't care.
yeah.
He's fearless. But
Everybody asks me if I dive, and I'm like, I've seen way too much happen on the boat to want to be in the water.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. As much as we're on the water, we see things that are really special, that create great memories and cool stories. But it also makes you, oh man, it makes you a little bit more apprehensive. It makes you think a little
Yeah,
bit. So I think about Sam doing that stuff. I'm like, you're crazy. Tell me
yeah.
about your permit. So we filmed a permit episode, and we don't have a ton of
So,
time, so we'll get into it, but we'll get more into it in the next segment. I love permit. You have a permit behind you. For those who can't see or aren't watching
yeah,
this radio show, he's got a permit behind him, and that's a painting that was done where you paint the permit and then you lay it on the paper. It's a Japanese thing, and then you pull the fish off. You must love permit to have one on your wall.
I love permit. I got one on my necklace too. They're
Oh
just,
yeah, I didn't even notice that.
yeah, they're the bread and butter. They're my favorite. I mean, they're just such a cool fish.
When did the permit start showing up? What's your fishery look like with that?
Um, I would say prime is March through June, July. Kind of
Okay,
coincides with our tarpon season, so that's
okay,
always nice too. But we get
okay,
them, I
yeah.
mean, we've had them where they come through year round and they don't leave.
Hmm.
And really, like if it came down to you have to catch a permit, you can almost make it happen. They more so move in and out rather than north south.
Hmm. Huh. Meaning further offshore and just disappear.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they'll go when they're when they're not around, when we say they're not around, it's not like they're up in Mississippi. They're
Right.
just somewhere on ledges, bare bottoms, somewhere just in the middle of nowhere. And
Huh.
you're not going to find them, but they're out there.
So when we fished them, obviously we wanted to sight fish them. We wanted to see them up on the surface, but that didn't happen. These fish were all and deeper on these 30-foot wrecks and reefs. What makes them want to float high as opposed to staying low?
There's a few things, calm water is they love calm water. We've seen some of the coolest display of nature watching these fish when they're undisturbed, totally undisturbed, flat, glassed out water, and they pick their heads totally up out of the water. I mean, all the way to their fins. I mean, this whole half of their body is out of the water. And you just watch them and I don't know what they're doing. They're like,
Yeah. Hey, well, we're coming up on a hard break, so we get back more with Captain Chris Argiro here on the Captain's Log Radio.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. Before we continue this conversation with Captain Chris, I want to talk to you about Stark Yacht Care from Marine Detail Supply Co. Listen, over the weekend, I was in St. Augustine. I had the Cayo demo boat. I was at the Old City Fly Shop, and I was showing the demo, the Cayo 180. It's an incredible skiff, but it's a 90-mile drive to get up there. And as you can imagine, being on the road for 90 miles, the boat started out being wet because I left early in the morning. There was dew on it. There's construction I drove through. The boat got dirty. And so I pulled out this Hydrate. It is a waterless wash from Stark Yacht Care. And I sprayed down the boat. I got my microfiber. I cleaned the boat. And I had so many people come up to me and go, wow, this boat's super clean. This boat looks great. I had one guy come out and go, what does that smell? It smells fantastic. If you're looking to clean your boat, listen, I have used so many products, but Marine Detail Supply Co. carries everything you're going to need from Stark Yacht Care. They make incredible products from boat soap to the Hydrate waterless wash to mildew cleaner to products that protect your seats. If you are looking to take care of your boat, you've made the investment in your boat, keep it looking good. If you want to wax it, there's all kinds of coatings. Reach out to my friends at Marine Detail Supply Co. Captain Ken Mercer is the man. He knows so much about cleaning boats. Call him direct and he'll get you taken care of. So Stark Yacht Care and my friends at Marine Detail Supply Co. Chris knows all about it. He uses it on his boat. It is incredible, incredible stuff. I would I'm not just saying that because they're a partner and a sponsor of the show. It is unbelievable the stuff they make, dude.
they're top notch. And Ken is just such a lovable guy. He's got those little cheeks you just want to pinch. He the whole gang, they're just, I knew nothing about the boat, surface technology world. I was Dawn dish soap and bleach.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
those
As are
guys,
so many people.
yeah, I mean, that's how I always grew up doing it. That's how everybody does it. And I quickly learned how much easier it can get and how
Yeah.
good their products really are.
Ken's good people. Ken actually is the one who introduced me to you. So I'm very thankful for him and his support and his friendship and just here we are going fishing and filming episodes and doing the radio show together. Well, before we got cut off at the break, we were talking about permit. One thing I've yet to experience are permit bunched up like schools. I've heard of schools of thousands of permit up on the surface. I'd be
Oh,
happy to see a school of 100. I'd be happy to see a school of 50 up on the surface, just chilling. And from what I'm told, these fish will pretty much eat anything. I think the best bait would be a crab, throwing a crab out there in front of them, and they're gonna just annihilate it. What's your favorite bait to throw at these crabs, and have you seen them do that? These big schools up on the surface.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. The massive schools are something pretty cool to see. When they're peak migration, you'll pull up to a place where there may have been 60, 80 fish, and you show up one day and you're like, I don't even know where to begin. you come three quarters of a mile off the wreck, and there's
Wow.
just permit as far as you can see.
Wow.
Um, with that being said, though, the bait of choice definitely is the crab up here. And it's funny, growing up in the Keys, it was totally 180. It was 90% shrimp bite, maybe
Hmm.
80% shrimp bite, 20% crab. Up here, it's the total opposite. It's 80% crab, 20% shrimp,
Huh.
from what
Well,
I've found.
I I'd like to see that and catch a few. On a live bait. I'd like to try. I don't have one with me, but DOA makes. I caught a redfish on it this week. Um, DOA makes a soft plastic that looks like a crab, and
Yeah.
it's called the squishy crab or something like that. Soft shell crab. That's it. I like to throw one of those. See if we catch one on artificial, and I'd love to throw. I got a couple buddies um, that tie these floating crab flies. I'd love to throw one of those at one of those permit. I've never caught a permit on fly. And then for the hardcore fly guy, relax. I know there is a difference between sight fishing one in 2 feet of water as opposed to sight fishing one offshore, near shore on a wreck or floating offshore. Um, but I would still like to throw a fly at one of those guys and see one smoke a fly on the surface. Oh, that would just be absolutely insane. I don't care. I'd go crazy, dude. That'd be so awesome.
I give the flats guys credit. They that's a different world. It's a hard fish to get to cooperate in, shallow water, let alone get a client to make a cast and do it over and over again. We don't get it where some days they'll eat whatever you throw at them,
Hmm.
if it's a crab, but they'll eat every bait that hits the water.
Hmm.
But there are days where they get locked up and you will not hook a fish, and there's just something about it. It's like tarpon fishing, sit on 100 fish and they won't eat, and then they just
Hmm.
decide we're gonna eat, or they take
Hmm.
off and leave, and then you're pissed.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've experienced that. I've been on the flats and thrown crab. Found a school of permit. We were in the Key West, probably fishing in 3 or 4 feet of water, and a school permit came in. And I threw a crab at one and watch this fish in the school, like kick its tail and take off. Like, I want that fish. I want that bait. And that was my first. And
That's
then I've
awesome.
seen them. I've seen them where you had a single come by and we sight fished one and we threw a crab at it. And it was like, nope, nope, nope. And then and another group came through, and this fish just did a 180 and just smoked it, and off it went. And it got really shallow, and there's coral heads, and there's little mangrove shoots, and you're just like lifting your rod up as high as you can to kind of hope that angle is good enough, or you don't hook one of those things and break off. I've thrown fly in the Keys at tarpon at permit, excuse me, and I watched a permit come up and nose my fly and then take off. It's like I haven't taken one on fly, and I've only caught a handful of permit, and they're one of those fish where I don't get the opportunity to fish for very often. And the few I've caught have been just absolute incredible. My first I caught with my wife; she was with me. Um, that was super special. The next one we caught was on film, and that one was massive. It was huge. Um, and then we filmed you, and you're a dog, man. You caught our episode. You caught all the permit. I learned something from you because I had never fished permit like that before. You're the first time I'd ever fished with permit offshore was with you. And typically when you hook a fish on the bottom, you want to kind of palm the spool, kind of slow that fish. You don't want to grab it, just stop the reel, you break off immediately. But kind of putting a little bit more pressure on that fish to keep them from digging down. I think about big grouper. You got to lock that drag and you got to turn that handle and you cannot quit or that fish is going to get into that wreck or that reef or whatever, that structure and break you off. But you taught me something I never heard before. With these permit, you've got to, if they start nosing down and head shaking and diving down, digging, you loosen up the drag. You take pressure off. You open your bail. And you told me that, but like I heard it, but it didn't register. And I grabbed my reel like to slow down to palm it, and you're like, no, 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 and it popped off and I broke off. Tell me about that, man. Tell me about how did you figure that out? Because that's something totally new for me.
Yeah, my dad, when I was a little kid, I just remember him saying stuff like that. And there's so many little things over the years that, I would hear my dad or somebody say, and you just start to integrate it a little bit because you run out of ideas, you break off 5, 10 permit in a row and you're like, what can I do differently? And there's only like one other thing you can do. If you crank the drag down and nothing happens, the only thing you can do is back the drag off.
Hmm.
And especially on permits. Permit are so finicky that, we have to go down to, 15, 20 pound leader. So you can't really horse that fish. That fish is stronger than what you can get them to eat. So your line is not gonna stop that fish like you can with a grouper or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, so you've got to back the drag off, and it just changes their angle. They don't want to go in the wreck, they want to go out. So if you take that pressure off, they will swim. You'll literally watch them going straight down, back the drag off or open the bail, and watch that line just start rising. They're still
Wow.
screaming, but they're screaming out.
Huh.
And that holds true with a lot. I mean, our snook, those offshore snook that we were messing with, same thing.
Really?
And then it's funny, like you hear guys that are like, oh, well, we went snapper fishing, caught a 28-inch gag grouper on a little snapper rod. And it's like, well,
Huh.
that's the same thing. It holds true with everything. You put less pressure on a fish and watch what he does. He'll just chill out.
Huh. Huh. Well, when I'm snook fishing in the mangroves, if the fish dogs into it, they just take off into the mangroves. Or it's redfish do the same thing. They know where they can take you to break off. So if you get rid of the pressure, your line hitting those barnacles, it's better. There's less friction there. So we do that to go chase after fish, but I've never done that offshore. And then when you said to do that, it made all the difference. And I watched you catch that first one, and same deal. You're just like, oh, you loosen your drag, that fish rose to the surface, just like it's supposed to. I mean, you had it dialed in. And then when you came back to the surface, you tightened up a little bit, you came tight, you got the fish to the boat. It was unbelievable. My first one I broke off, man. I was like, dang it, dude. You just told me that. And I heard you, but I didn't process it because I've never seen something like that happen. Hey, we're quickly coming up on our next break. When we get back, more with the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. Thanks for listening in. We got more coming really quick.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. It's our final segment of the show. And before we get started, I want to just invite you. Hey, I love hearing from you guys. I love reading your emails and your comments and your messages on social media. So please reach out at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can watch the full-length episodes. They're on our YouTube channel at the Captain's Log TV. And of course, you can watch all of our seasons, full-length episodes on Waypoint TV and the Waypoint TV app. Really appreciate you guys following along and watching there. So, Chris, last segment, man. This last episode, we had a plan. It was permit, but our day started, and we didn't film this, and I kind of wish we had. Our day
Yeah.
started, bro. We got there, and I walked up to the boat, and I'm like, "Where's Chris at? What's he doing?" You were in the boat, fixing the boat. I was like, "Why is the boat still in the trailer?" We had a major problem.
Major
Um,
problem.
Boat taking on water. We have hoses that are too short. Tell me
Oh,
about that. People don't realize when you're a full-time cap, boat stands for break out another thousand. When you're a full-time captain, you're running your boat every day and you're running hard, things break. And they never break at the right moment. I try so hard to preach preventative maintenance, and no matter how hard and how much you try to keep things up to date and maintained, when you're dealing with saltwater elements, things break. So catch us up. What happened? What broke? And tell us all about that morning.
Dude, I don't even, it was like, yeah, I got down to the boat and I was planning on going to get bait before you guys showed up. And, you guys drove 4 hours. It's not like I could have just said, hey, boat's broke, let's go tomorrow. I get down there and I back the boat in the water and both bilges right away kick on, just pumping water. And I'm like, oh, I look in the bilge, the live well, one of the seals on the live well, like just came apart and was just dumping in so long story short, I'm like, okay, no problem. It was one of those days that it's like, this day is going to be this day and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm like, all right, no problem. I'll shut the valve off, right? Shut the big C valve off. Well, shut it off. Water's still pouring. The Seacock's broke. I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll just switch this pump over here and put this pump over here. I do that, and the hose was too short to fit on that. They're the same pump, but it wouldn't work somehow. I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll switch the hoses. Switch the hose, and then I don't even remember what happened with that. And we ended up having to go to West Marine at 10:30 in the morning, and we were supposed
Yeah,
to have been on the water for about 3 hours. So we filmed that whole episode in what, 3.5, 4 hours.
yeah. And you
Oh,
know, I I get it. Like I looked at you, I'm like, bro, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna MacGyver this somehow. We're gonna figure it out. And if not, then we're gonna have to run to the store and buy some stuff. But things happen. I can't tell you how many times I have rigged things up. I have redneck things before a client shows up, like praying that they're late. I'm like, hey guys, I'm running a few minutes behind. You should stop and grab a breakfast sandwich at the gas station or whatever so I can get something fixed. Otherwise,
yeah.
you're not going out. And being a full-time charter captain, if you don't get it fixed and you don't get it out, you're not getting paid that day. So it's super, super important that you're able to do these things and figure these things out. And some days you can't. And some days you
Well, and
have to
then
disappoint people.
do all of that, and then you got to put your game face on and entertain, and it's you get done. Like I after our situation, I was like, you know what? I don't care if I ever fish again, but we're heading out with the camera, so it's like let's go and make it a good
Let's
time.
make
And we
it
had a
happen.
great time, but it's that mental, like,
Yeah.
man, just breaks you down.
Yeah.
But that's boat. That's every boat ever. They haven't made the boat that doesn't break yet.
That's right, dude. I tell you, when you run hard and you run as many trips as we do, things are going to break. It's part of the game. So yeah, once we got all of that figured out and fixed and buttoned up, it seemed like our bad luck didn't want to end that day. Now, don't hear me incorrectly, like those who are listening at home. We caught a bunch of fish. We landed a variety of fish: redfish, permit, snook, Goliath grouper. Did you catch a
We got a
barracuda,
cobia, little
got a
cobia.
cobia, a little cobia. Like we got a ton of fish, but we must have broken off 30, 40, 50 times. We would hook into fish. Now, the first one was on me for grabbing the spool, but from then on, it was you'd hook a fish and we'd break. We'd hit something, another fish would run into it. We had lines break, we had hooks break, we had hooks just pull, we had a ton of hooks just pop off. It was one thing after another. And in the narration, and the ending narration, I read a quote. And I read this quote. There's a ton of quotes. If you go on the Google and you search fishing quotes, there's a ton of quotes about fishing. But this one struck home. And it was, don't let the fishing ruin the fishing. And I was like, that's perfect. Because whenever I get a chance to go fishing, I'm excited. I'm happy. I'm going fishing. Because most of the time, I'm I'm the guy taking someone fishing. I'm the guy in the back of the boat pulling and looking for the fish. You're in that same boat. Most of the captains, all of the captains that I film with and record with the radio show are in that same boat where we're the people taking the people fishing. So I was just thrilled to go fishing. Plus, I get to go fishing with you. Like, I love fishing with you. You are just dialed in every time I fish with you, even if it's a tough day. Dude, we broke off 50 fish, 50 fish,
Yeah.
and we still landed a ton of fish. That says so much about you, your fishery, how well you have it dialed in, and how much you know as a captain in the areas to fish. And we bounced from wreck to wreck to wreck. You knew exactly where to go. You didn't waste any time. But we still had a really tough day. And
Yeah.
again, don't let the fishing ruin the fishing. Like I
You know,
really want.
I got one thing. It is funny you said that. My I would have days when I was still young in the game and really trying to figure out certain species and stuff. I would call my dad because he charter fished for a long time in Key West, and I would call him and say, "Dad, these fish did this today. Why did they do this? I can't figure it out, you know." And I would come home and just be so mad at the fish. And he literally laughed. And he's like, uh, I was mad at the fish for 30 years. I'm not mad at the fish anymore. Now it's your turn. And it's just that stuck with me because you really, I mean, I find myself mad at the fish more than I'm, not. But that's part of it. And
Yeah,
you kind of, that was hard for me to learn when I was starting out is that you're gonna have tough days. And at the end of the day, it's a good day when you're there.
bingo,
And you
bingo.
got clients that or friends or family or maybe you only get to go out once or twice a month that it's not just about you and the fish, it's about everybody involved in the
Yeah,
situation.
yeah. I I was telling someone yesterday.
Yeah, we broke off a lot of fish though. I was not happy.
Yeah, we did break off a lot of fish. I was telling someone yesterday, one of my one of my favorite things is early mornings. It's dark. It's slicked out, especially summertime. It's hot and muggy. And I put my boat in the water and I'm running across the river and it's quiet and there's nobody around. And it's just me and my boat and my clients. And I'm anticipating, I'm thinking about my moves for the day, thinking about the fish that we're going to present to, thinking about the opportunities that we're going to have. All of those are part of our day, of our fishing experience. And I think about fishing with my kids. I think about taking them and giving them the utmost experience, whether that be we have way too many snacks, or we go and get a happy meal at the end of our fishing day, or my kid catches the biggest fish of his 4-year-old life, right? It's all about creating these wonderful memories with your family, your friends, being on the water. I love that. So when I read that quote, man, I was just like, this is perfect for our day.
Yeah.
I got to
Yeah.
spend a day with a really fishy dude, a really good friend of mine, a guy who I value and trust and learn from every time I go fishing. And even though we still had a tougher day, quote unquote, we still put in 5 different species. And what was really cool about our first episode together, and we're running into our last minute. Our first episode together, we were looking for one more fish, one more spot, and we went back to a spot that we had gone to earlier in the day. And there was a boat there the first time we went there. So we left, showing some etiquette. We left them alone, said, hey, they're fishing it. And you had said something like, oh, they're fishing it, but they're fishing it wrong. Let's come back here. So we wanted one more fish. And we go back there, and our first drop, our baits hit the bottom, and it wasn't. I mean, the sun is getting ready to come down. It's a beautiful evening, and I came tight. You came tight. We finished our episode with another double. It was just an incredible cap to our day. That's something I'm always going to remember. Whenever I get the chance to fish with you, it's always, hey, what cool, exciting memory are we going to make today? I'm so thankful to have you on the show, man. Thankful to have you for different episodes and here on the Captain's Log Radio. If you're ever in the Southwest Florida area, reach out to my good friend Captain Chris at Sea Reaper Sportfishing. This dude's going to put you on fish. He is the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Captain Chris Argiro. Thank you so much for being on the Captain's Log Radio. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.